Hi, my name is Kristin. This is Kristin Kraves of Books. So I'm here with another collab for you, another one put together by Becky from Bex Reads. I say it every time, but she's so creative and I love collabing with her. And we've been doing a lot of buddy reads lately as well. And Jess from Honest Fiction and April from Happily Ever April are also posting this video today, so I will leave a link to everybody's channel down below and their videos. And today we are discussing things that we want to see more of in books. And I love this idea, but it was a bit difficult for me because I feel like the things that I like are kind of popular or becoming more popular, like foodie romances. When I first got into those, there were a few here and there, but now I feel like they're everywhere and I love that. Cozy fantasy, of course, is becoming more and more popular, and that's one of my favorite things. So I really had to sit down and think for this. And most of these are just themes or tropes or genres I want to see more of, like subgenres. A couple of them are like physical things I want to see more of in books. Really, I'm sure a lot of these things exist, I'm just not aware of them, or I know of the book, I just don't know it has this trope that I like. So selfishly, this is just a video for you to recommend books to me if you know that they have these things that I like and that I'm looking for. So you know that I love Greek myth retellings. You can't see it in this video. So you know that I love Greek myth retellings. You can't see it in the background, but the top shelf, I have a whole section for Greek myth retellings, but I want to expand that a bit more. I want more non-Greek myth retellings, myths from other cultures, even folklore from other cultures, retellings like that. I really am on the hunt for it. I do think they were becoming more popular. So two that I absolutely love and you'll always see me recommending are The Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lan Tan. This is based on Chinese mythology. And The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axio, and this is based on Korean folklore and myths. So I just need more like this from different cultures, maybe Egyptian mythology, even Norse mythology. The only Norse mythological retelling that I can remember reading is Norse mythology by Neil Gaiman, and I really loved that. And I'll take more Loki stories, so if you have any recommendations for that. One that came on my radar recently is When Oceans Rise, and that is a Little Mermaid retelling, but it's also based on Filipino mythology. So I just love myth retellings in general. I want to explore that more. I want more diversity when it comes to those and just to have more of them on my radar. So if you know of any, let me know. Something that I realized recently that I really like are labyrinths. I need more books with labyrinths, and I'm sure there are thousands of them out there. It's just not something I paid attention to until recently because I adored Pure Nessie by Suzanne Clark. It was the best book I read the year that it came out, and it remains a favorite. And if you've read this, you know that there's like a labyrinth in this, sort of. It's like a house that is its own world. There are oceans and tides and everything, and I just like that whole concept. So part of it, maybe it's just not labyrinths, it's a vibe. I am searching for anything that reminds you of Pure Nessie, and I found one last month, and that is The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence, and this is a labyrinth and it's a library. And these two are very different in premise, but vibe and tonally they felt really similar, and I've been chasing something that feels like Pure Nessie for ages. And if you know anything that you would comp to either of these two books, please let me know, because it's such a hard thing to find, and I think if you've read either of them, you know what I'm talking about. It's not something that I can really explain. It's just an atmosphere, a vibe, a labyrinth, if you will. And yeah, that's something I am desperate for. I want more wholesome sci-fi. I like wholesome books in general. You know that I like cozy fantasy, I already said that, but I feel like that's harder to find in sci-fi unless you're reading like Becky Chambers, who is one of my favorite authors. I've read everything she's ever written. This is The Long Way to the Small Angry Planet. All the books in the Wayfair series I would call wholesome sci-fi. Her Monk and Robot series, those two books are also wholesome. So like if you think of wholesome sci-fi, I think Becky Chambers is the first author that comes to mind, and I feel like it's impossible to find somebody who's writing something similar to what she does. So if you know of anybody, let me know. And then the other one that kind of comes to mind for me is Murderbot by Martha Wells. I love that series. I would call that wholesome sci-fi, even though there are stakes and adventures and things. The characters are kind of charming and wholesome, and there's just, it's a vibe again. Do you know what I'm talking about? And whenever I look up like cozy sci-fi, wholesome sci-fi, all I see recommended are Becky Chambers and Martha Wells, so I need more, and let me know. And then speaking of sci-fi, I would love to read more murder mysteries set in space. So to go back to Murderbot for a second, there is one book in that series that I would call a murder mystery, and that is Fugitive Telemetry. That is the last novella that came out, and I loved that so much. It was like an isolated murder mystery and very separate from the rest of the books, but it was so fun to see Murderbot kind of like a detective, and I need more of that. The other one that comes to mind is obviously The Spareman, which I adored when I read it last year, and it's like Agatha Christie in space. So if you could find, or you know of, any books that are like Agatha Christie in space, I would love to hear them. I want more books like that in my life. I just think that is so much fun, and it kind of leans into that wholesome sci-fi vibe as well. This has been on my mind because I am a co-host for Once Upon a Readathon, the Treasure Island edition, and the team that I am co-captaining is Jen. And as I'm reading these Jen books, I'm finding that I love them, and I knew that about myself, but I've rarely been let down by one. I don't think I ever have. And they're just harder to find. There's not as many out there as there are books about vampires or witches or fae, which you know are not my favorite. So some of my favorites, and one of my favorite books ever is The Golem and the Jinni by Helene Wecker. One I just read and we'll talk about soon is The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. Loved it. One I just finished this morning, The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdallah. I love them all. I think part of what makes Jen stories so interesting for me is that they're often desert fantasies, which is something that I think I want more of as well. The Golem and the Jinni, isn't it set in New York? But these two are. And I also read A Dead Jinn and Caro by P. Jelly Clark and really like that. Need to continue on with that series. But I like the desert setting more than I like settings on water for some reason. I thought that I would be a water setting kind of person on the sea, but I like desert settings. Maybe there's something about the isolation of that. I don't know what it is, but that is like my preference. And though in theory you might think that these books tend to read the same because they're often inspired by the same stories, like 1001 Nights, they are all very unique to me and very different. And I just like the whole premise of a Jen, that they all seem to be morally gray. I think that's part of what I like about them as well. And don't get me wrong, you know, witches and vampires is my favorite. It probably goes witches, vampires, then Jen. But the first two, I don't have any problem fighting. I have read a million books like that. There are a million on my TBR, but I feel like I need more Jen books. I have This Woven Kingdom on my TBR. I've read An Ember in the Ashes. I just don't think there's a lot that I'm not aware of. And if you know of some more obscure ones, please let me know, because it is just something that always hits for me. This next thing is something that I just love in the summertime. I just want to read these on the beach, and I always am on the lookout for them. But they're very specific and hard to find, and that is teen paranormal slashers. Something like This Delicious Death by Kayla Cottingham. I haven't read this. This just came out. It is a zombie book, and we're following these girls, teenage girls, who are zombies and living off synthetic meat, and then one of them ends up killing somebody, and they just have to survive, and it's a slasher and gory, apparently. And the tagline is, it's a girly girl world. There's something about this vibe that I love. I've read The Lost Girls, and that is a vampire story that's similar to this. And there's also that In Nightfalls by, I think that's Suzanne Young. That looks good too. So it's just a very specific vibe, and I feel like they always have really cool covers. They're on the shorter side. You know that it's not something you can take too seriously, but just sounds like fun. So if you know of any, let me know, because I feel like it's a very specific niche genre, and I like teen slashers that aren't paranormal, but the paranormal element makes me that much more excited to read them. So if you know any with vampires, werewolves, anything like that, let me know, because that is what I love to read on the beach. If not reading a romance by the beach, I want to be reading something like this. And actually I think a lot of these also have romantic elements and are also typically sapphic, so maybe that's part of it too, but yeah, they're just such a good time. I only have one example for this next one, and it's very, very niche, and I don't know that it could be pulled off all of the time, and I'm kind of making this up myself, but it's Disgust to Love, not Enemies to Lovers, because I'm thinking of Radiance by Grace Draven. I love that, and it was this situation where they found each other horribly unattractive because they were from different races, but they got along right away. So they weren't enemies, they just were disgusted by one another, and eventually they found love and became really attracted to one another, and it just worked. If there are any other books like that out there, let me know. That is something that I loved, and I wasn't expecting it or hadn't come across it before, and I know it's probably a hard thing to do over and over again, but I thought it was genius, and I thought it was fantastic, and I want something similar. So I do have to continue on with that series, but yeah, if there's anything that you would comp to Radiance, I need it. Give it to me now. I think a lot of us like boarding school settings, especially in something like fantasy, but I love it in horror. And there have been some of my favorite horror books have boarding school settings. So one that comes to mind right away is The Broken Girls by Simone St. James, which you might classify more as thriller, but it is kind of paranormal as well, and I just thought that that was really fantastic. It's my favorite book of hers that I've read so far, and it is about a boarding school in the past that is now closed and is reopening, and maybe it's haunted. Really great, and one that I would actually comp to that, but this one reads, it's a lot darker, is Plain Bad Heroines by Emily Danforth, which is one of my favorite books ever, and it's the same thing. It's set at a boarding school. We are looking in the past to what happened to all of these girls there, and then we are in the present, and they're actually making a movie about the situation, and I thought it was fantastic, and I just like that setting. And then one that maybe you wouldn't call horror, even telling you the genre of this is a spoiler, but it's my favorite book of all time, and that is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, and a lot of horrific things happen in this boarding school. So I think it counts, and I just like that setting. I like when it's darker elements to it. So those are the 3 books that I know of. There are probably way more out there that I'm just not aware of, so please tell me. Really, this isn't this video is just becoming recommend me books, and that is what I wanted it to be. So there you go, because I think a lot of this is just me not knowing things, me not being aware of every book that is out there. So help me. In terms of things that I want my books to have physically, there's only 2 things, but I think they relate to a lot of the classics that I own. I just wish that more modern fiction had these elements as well, and they didn't have to be special editions to get them. So the first thing that comes to mind are illustrations, and I just think that for a certain type of story, illustrations work really, really well. If it's a fairy tale, even some horror or fantasy, just adding that illustration throughout really brings a story to life. And I like any book that's kind of feels like storytelling, if you know what I mean, to have some illustrations. And I just showed you Plain Bad Heroines, which is one of my favorite books ever, and it does have illustrations, so I will show you. So things like this, and it just has even a quote underneath, and there are little illustrations of wasps throughout the story as well. Here's a good one here. So it just adds to the vibe, and I think they are great. Another one is one I just bought. This is Soulless by Gail Geringer, and even the end pages on this are gorgeous. This is a special edition, but it didn't cost any more. I actually found it for $8. But here are the illustrations in that one. And then this one is a special edition, but I think that the standard edition has the illustrations as well. And this is Gallant, which I have not read yet. But there you go, there's an illustration in Gallant. So I just wish more books would do that, but I know it probably adds to the cost and things like that. I just think it adds to the experience as a reader. And the last thing are ribbons. I love a good ribbon in my book, and it's like, how much does that cost? 10 cents to add a ribbon, and somehow it brings me so much joy. I only found one book on my shelf that is not a classic that has a ribbon on it, and this is The Wolf Den by Elodie Harper. I haven't read this yet, but I really need to. And there's a nice orange ribbon. I just think it adds so much, and this is just the standard edition. I think it came from the UK, this one, but I'm hoping that the sequel has this ribbon as well. I don't know why. That brings me so much joy. Some classics that I have that have the ribbon. Here is my beautiful edition of The Complete Grimm's Fairy Tales. I am in love with this edition. There's the ribbon there and some illustrations too. I just think this is beautiful. And then I have the Tales from Shakespeare. And again, this has a ribbon in it, which I have never removed from the book because I rarely read the classics that I buy. I just buy them because they're so beautiful. But there you go. Look how pretty this edition is. So yeah. That is this video. If you have any recommendations for any of the things that I want more from in my books, please let me know and leave those down below. Also, I'd be really curious to know what you want more from, because I really had to think about this one for a minute and stare at my shelves to see what I love and what I need more of. So thank you again for your support. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.